Jim, we have been trying to schedule this thing, and I am glad you are finally on the show. How are you? You're in Texas, aren't you? How are you, man?
Yes, I am. I'm in the Dallas area. I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. I don't know what's going on there, but we are in the middle of a flood. It feels like Noah's Ark out here today, but we need the rain, so we will take it.
We had that yesterday. We probably
Okay,
got 4 inches of rain.
okay,
I went
okay.
out last night and my entire yard was like almost standing water. Every step I took was just puddle after puddle after puddle. So yeah, it's that time of year where everything goes from here north versus the winter when it comes from you down to us.
Exactly. We have the reversal. Before we're going to post your info. Uh, Jim Carlough is a prolific author, speaker, really focuses on leadership. But let me ask you the 30-second version of it. Were you in the fifth grade, went to career day and said, I'm going to be a leadership speaker and author? How did you how did, how did you end up here?
So it's interesting. I From the moment I was 4 years old, I told everybody I was going to be a lawyer, and
Okay.
here's how that came about. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, and the postman walked the route from house to house to house. And our mailman's name was Charlie Smith. He also went to our church. And so when he got to my house, I would walk his route with him. And of course, in those days, we're talking the 60s, your parents didn't care if you went with the neighbors. They were trusting, right? You don't necessarily do that today, but you did that in the 60s. So when Charlie and I used to walk, he, periodically we would talk about what do I want to do when I grow up? And I said, well, I certainly don't want to be a mailman because this is tiring, all this walking. And he said, yeah, you don't want to be a mailman. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to make money.
Right.
He, he said, okay. He said, well, and even then I was articulate. He says, well, you talk well. He says, anything else besides money? I said, well, I want a big desk. And he immediately said, you need to be a lawyer.
Of course.
And from that point forward, I told everybody I was going to be a lawyer. I get into college, and all of a sudden I realized college is expensive, and my family couldn't afford to just send me to college. And I knew I had all these loans, and I'm like, law school is going to be even more money. And so when I got ready for graduation, I said, I can't even think about going to law school. I need to go out and start making a living. And my first job out of college was immediately in the healthcare sector, working for a health insurance company in New Jersey.
Wow. 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 And then to now, how did you pivot into just going around the world helping people on maximizing their leadership capabilities?
So it's interesting. As I migrated my career, I went from working for the insurance companies to working for technology companies that focused on the healthcare sector. And it was around 2000, during the time when I worked at Perot Systems and worked for Ross Perot himself, that I started to see leadership in a different light
Mm,
and realized that I had something that I could help other people with.
mm.
And so I started mentoring people. And so for the last 25 years, I've really mentored people on leadership just based on what I learned in my journey. And that continued right up until today. In fact, I have one person I have mentored ever since the year 2000.
Wow.
And people come and go and they move and you lose touch with them. But I have mentored a number of people over the years. And one of the consistent traits, one of the consistent things that I saw is a lot of people entered into a management job not understanding what really leadership was. When I first started in 1983, most management people and leaders were authoritarian, and they just told you, you do this and you do it this way, and I want to see it in green and I want 3 copies. And that's the way it was done. but leadership has evolved, and it's very, very different today. In fact, when I look back at my first leadership position, I actually cringe and think that I owe these people an apology for the way they were treated, because in today's world, that wouldn't work. Which is
Absolutely.
which is why I say two things. Leaders are developed. You are
Mm,
not born a leader. I
mm,
To me, when people say, "Oh, you're a born leader," no, you're not a born leader. You're a developed leader.
mm.
I am different today than I was 10 years ago, than I was 20 years ago, than I was 30 years ago. And it is all an evolutionary process. And when people make the jump and say they want to be in leadership, I try to tell them that's a 24/7 job, and you're giving yourself a pathway to the future that if you stay on that trajectory, you will always be evolving and you will always be learning.
Couldn't couldn't agree with you more. Those are such sage words. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, ironically, is around AI and this thing that's taken over our world. Um, I am deeply biased for human. I'm a technologist. I started my career as a software developer, has been in around technology. But I am I'm a little bit concerned we don't have balance here. If I think about employee engagement, for example, we were making steady progress for years. It wasn't dramatic, but things were in there, and we have given all of that back. We are back to where we were in 2014. Like we're going backwards over the last several years. And so maybe the first question would be, are the rules of leadership changed because of AI, meaning AI is doing all of this, reading our email, what have you? Does that then mean that, this emphasis around leadership, does that change our fundamental need around leadership?
My opinion is no. And the reason my opinion is no is AI can help me write my LinkedIn post or my
Yes,
Facebook post
of course.
or do research for me. But AI can't tell me if you're having a bad day.
Mm,
AI can't tell me if you're having struggles at home or your kid is sick. AI can't tell me how best to potentially motivate you. It doesn't have human emotion.
mm,
It'll never have human emotion. And in fact, if you look at the things that I talk about and that I help people in mentoring with, it's not about being book smart. It's about being people smart and
mm.
being able to relate to your team and to be able to understand the things that they're going through. I don't think AI can have compassion, and I don't think AI can have empathy. You have to tell AI what you want. I want you to write a paragraph that shows that I'm empathetic to Bill's challenge over here, which is X. But it's not going to be able to understand Bill. It's only going to be able to understand the prompt and that it's got to go get some information to give to you, but it still may not even be the right thing to do for Bill.
I I call it the difference between, because there are plenty of my colleagues who would disagree with you on the human emotion part. And what I say to them is, and they will all see this point, is it's synthetic emotion. So in other words, it's a little bit like a sociopath trying to fake empathy. Right? So like it can say the words. It can I am sorry. It can, but at the end of the day, if you and I are having a conversation, we're having this human moment, I probably am going to say the wrong words. Right? That's not what emotion is about. I'll probably say the wrong thing. But you will see it and we will have this human connection. It's not the synthesized one, AI is going to find the right vocabulary and say, I'm deeply sorry. But it will never satisfy you that human need of human connection. It can create a synthetic one, but the real one is not there, and for all of the reasons you said. And so I guess my follow-up would be, let's dive into it, because I think this is really important. What are these critical attributes, even in the age of AI? What are these critical attributes that leaders need in our world today?
So the one characteristic that I say is non-negotiable
Hmm.
is integrity.
Say more.
Integrity. I was speaking at the University of North Texas in February,
Right.
and I was in a lecture hall, and it was about 80 people, and I was talking about integrity and how integrity it's got to be the strength pillar, and everything else is an offshoot of it, because without integrity, you can't show empathy, you can't show compassion, because nobody will believe you. They'll think you're fake. And I was really, I wasn't hammering it, but I got the message home to the point that a young lady in the second row, far to my left, raised her hand, and she said, "Instead of 6 pillars, shouldn't you have built a statue with integrity at the base?" And I went, "Oh my God, you're so right."
Mm.
Integrity is the foundational element for which everything else is built upon. If you don't have integrity, you can't build trust with your team. If you don't have integrity, when you need to show compassion or empathy, it won't be believed. If you can't operate with integrity, where you are going down the center of the road every time, and every decision you make is consistently through the same process or whatever, and you don't favor somebody over here or somebody over here, people will notice that. And when they know, the minute you lose that trust,
Mm.
because they don't trust that they don't see you walking and talking the talk with integrity, you've lost that team, and your turnover is going to be higher. The people will be less loyal. They won't believe in your vision, and they're not going to follow you into battle. Plain and simple.
I think, and I think you would agree that, you know, business doesn't live in a vacuum. Business lives inside of the larger society. And we're at a place where there's loss of trust in institutions, right? In our political leaders, in our institutions, even in the church, just loss of trust overall. So it's no wonder that in the workplace, again, I'm going to go back to Gallup. Like like we are so disengaged. And when you double click into why people are disengaged, it's with their manager, right? Because at the end of the day, everything's local. So I'm not saying it's just your manager, but that's the face of the company. That's the person who, who represents this organization I am a part of. And so I'd love for you to, let's do a diagnosis of where we are today, where majority of people show up to a work disengaged. Like a majority of people are just going through life, just sort of checking the boxes. And by the way, work is where you spend 1/3 of your life at least. And it can't be the people, because it's universal. So there's something in the water. As someone who has been at this topic, for 25 years, my question to you would be, can you talk about the factors that first got us here to where we are at this place of this crisis of leadership?
I think it's been an evolutionary process, and I think the advent of social media has propelled it to new heights.
Mm.
I don't post political commentary. Um, I and I see a lot of usage of social media where somebody's going to take a hand grenade, toss it over, and then go hide behind the curtain. And that's dangerous. and not that people have real hand grenades, but they freely attack people, and it to me personally, I'm going to say this and upset some people, but it probably starts with the media, and then it gets compounded by the stuff that we get thrown at us through social media. I don't when COVID hit, I stopped watching the news
Mm.
because I couldn't believe the differences between channel A and channel B and the things they were saying. And it reminded me of a class I had in college. So I'm a graduate of Seton Hall University in New Jersey. It's Catholic University. And I took a class that was called Contemporary Moral Values. It is probably the class I remember most. There was no textbook. But each class, you needed to bring into class either the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, or the Washington Post. And you had to be able to take an article from the main section and discuss the political background of the writer of the article,
Mm.
the religious background of the writer of the article, and what they were trying, and the political slant that they were trying to convince you of. Now, I graduated college in 1983. So started college in 1979. And even then, when you read those popular newspapers, it took some time, but this professor got us to understand how to take the words on the paper to figure out the political background, the religious
Wow.
background, and it has served me extremely well. And when COVID hit, I really got to the point where I couldn't believe anybody. And I just stopped watching the news because did you ever notice if you really watch a news channel, even local news, how many things they report on that are negative
But
versus
yeah,
how many things are positive?
very
It's
true.
99% negative.
Yeah, I hardly ever hear. I mean, they start the thing and they're trying to scare me to death. Uh, um, from the very start of the conversation. I mean, when I don't watch the local news, but when I did, the world was always there was some horrible thing was coming
Yep. The
all the time.
sky's falling.
Yeah, and and how is that sipped into the world of business? Is it that our leaders then also show up and this is permeating us at work as well?
I think there is. Now, here's the good news. I've worked for some great leaders in my career,
Mhm.
and I really believe in the 80-20 rule, but it's probably the 90-10 rule. There's 10% of the leaders that are out there that are probably lack integrity, and you don't want to work for them. And there's 90% of them who actually do care about the journey that they're taking and care about the people that work for them and take care of them. But
Mm.
that 10% of that population gives everybody else, a bad frame of reference. I've worked for at least one terrible leader in my career. And if you're working for if you work for a leader that lacks integrity and or is unprofessional in the way they treat people, you need to get out of that environment and find something that you can enjoy. If you can't have fun at work, and when I say fun, I don't mean playing games all day or a ping pong table, but if you don't enjoy what you're doing, life is too short to be stuck in that rabbit hole. And I mean, you can't go home every night and kiss your spouse or kick the dog because you're frustrated because of something that happened at work because you're not enjoying it. And I take a lot of phone calls from people who tell me, "Hey, I was faced with this situation at work, and I think the person crossed the line." And I have to say honestly, I would agree with you with that, or no, maybe you misread it, and try to help them through that. But there are pockets of leaders that are out there that there are pockets of leaders that are out there that when you see a leader that is constantly changing the positions underneath them and who is in those roles, I call that changing the chairs, moving the chairs on the Titanic. That leader, by doing that, is hiding their own inability to effectively lead, because he or she can always say, well, it's the people underneath me, which is why I just cleaned house. At the end of the day, the changing of the chairs on the Titanic are not going to prevent the Titanic from sinking. So
True.
eventually that ship sinks.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's collateral damage in the process in human people.
For sure. And I I I recognize some of those chairs on the Titanic stars. I want folks to get to know you a bit, and we're going to put your info and LinkedIn on the show. So let me ask you a fun one. What is a $50 purchase, $50 and under purchase that you've made that has been impactful to your life in a positive or negative way?
So I had to really think hard about this, because a lot of things cost more than $50 today,
Oh yes. Oh
right?
yes.
But I when I think about it, very early in my career, I had a bad habit of losing Bic pens. Everybody used Bic pens. So I was very proud of the fact the day that I went out and I bought my first expensive pen, which at the time was under $50.
Mm.
It was made by a German company. It was a Pelican. You can still get Pelicans today. They're a little bit more money. They're not as popular as a Mont Blanc, but I enjoy a good writing instrument, and I also did it because I said I'm tired of going to the store and buying Bic pens. If I buy a better pen, I'm less likely to lose it. And so the best purchase I ever made was my first good pen.
That's that's a good one. Um, I want to come back to this topic again and think about a world I'm very familiar with. So there's problems in workplaces and at home and everywhere. And our most popular way of solving them tends to be technology, right? So something happens, we'll buy this thing, we'll push the button, and it'll be solved. So today, in many businesses, AI is the latest one. AI, you're going to sprinkle some of that AI dust on everything, and things would be great. Well, this may surprise you, but it's not working out so well. Like in fact, it's stumbling, it's failing. These implementations are failing. And then we're now in the pointing of maybe the technology didn't didn't work as planned. You've been around the block and you're working with all of these leaders in all phases of life. What has been your experience and why a lot of these implementations, grandiose plans, particularly at work or frankly even in life, what tends to be at the root of it? Why they fail?
So poor planning is part of it. Not understanding what you're implementing is part of it. A big part of it is poor data,
Mm,
and poor and I'm in the healthcare industry, and we work with health plans or health insurance companies, healthcare entities like in that kind of sector. And I always say, if you've seen one health plan, you've seen one health plan.
mm.
You know, a claim, a healthcare claim, has set fields and certain information that has to be included on a claim. Yet you go to health plan A and they tell you, we have clean data. We don't have any garbage in our data. Then you get a copy of that data and you tell them, we can't use that data. You got all this extra junk in here that doesn't help you with a HIPAA transaction or to speed up processing of a claim. And so then they have to go through a cleansing exercise. So, a quality improvement exercise with regard to their data. So I think data is another thing. I think also another portion of it is, in a lot of implementation of technology, and we see it all the time, you go to a business entity and you say, hey, we got this new platform X, right? And we're going to implement it here because it's going to improve our business. And then when you bring the subject matter experts in, and the technology people are in the room saying, okay, we're going to configure this portion, and this is the portion that does X, Y, and Z, and here's how the system should work. And then the business users say, yeah, but that's not how we do it. And they end up configuring the new system to work exactly like the old system does. And then they wonder why the results are the same as they had with the old system.
Amen. Yeah.
Don't buy technology if you're not going to take advantage of what it's bringing to you. And I think that's part of the failures with AI, in addition to poor data and the other things we talked about. I think it all is a combination. And not only that, I am inundated with people calling about AI for this unique situation, AI for this, AI for this, AI for this. And it would be unaffordable to buy every single thing that somebody calls you about. But item B, a lot of them can't demonstrate the ROI because it's too new to be able to do it. And I almost feel that we're at the point, I'm dating myself now. I feel like we're at the point where we were in the 90s, where people were selling vapor
Correct. Yeah.
as
With the internet.
technology,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I sense that AI is putting us in that same place we were in, and it's going to take a few years to whittle out the imposters to get to what will
The real
really
value
work
is,
and move
yeah.
forward.
I couldn't agree with you more. I have a few more places I wanted to go with you. One is, how do you build strong teams in the context of where we are in the world now, right? We're more distributed. We're more fragmented. How do you, coach people about building strong teams?
One, increased communications. The fact that you're not connected in the same hallway and can't have coffee together or talk at the water cooler or on the way to the parking lot means you have to interact more frequently. I talk to my direct reports multiple times a week, but two in a formal way. Everybody has a formal one-on-one meeting, and there's a formal team meeting. The team meeting is my meeting where I have my agenda of things I want to cover with the team and review. The one-on-one meeting is the employees meeting for them to bring to me the things they're struggling with or challenged with, or things that they need from me or need from others and need my help. It is not that's not my meeting, it's their meeting. And it gives them an opportunity to help me understand what they're going through in terms of work or even at home, and to help them deal with those things. And we, as a company, we have a weekly all hands meeting. Now it's only 30 minutes, but we have updates from all kinds of people in the organization. But every week we have a full 30-minute agenda, and we go through it really quick with all the things that are happening in the organization. Here are the good things we've done in the last week. Here are the challenges we've had in the last week in this area. And it's good to share challenges, because even though you may be working through them, somebody else may hear that and say, I had something similar. Maybe I can help them. And now you're getting teams talking and trying to solve things together, which, because you're no longer in the same office, you can't discuss that at the water cooler or just go in a conference room.
Love it. What if I'm listening to this and I'm bought into all of this and I want to get started? Give me, two or three things I can start with to get me going down this road.
I think the first thing is, if you're talking leadership from a leadership perspective,
Yeah.
I think you have to make a list of the things you believe you do well in leadership. And start, and this is typically how I start with a new mentor or mentoree. Tell me what you do well. And then tell me the areas that you think you struggle in or that you think you could do better in. And then we try to correlate them to skill sets. So if somebody tells me they're really good at managing the financials and they're really good at this and they're really good at this, but I'm not very good over here at making the right decision. Okay, let's start talking about integrity and building a process to make consistent decisions that will be seen as, not wavering one way or the other, and start there, because you have to start to build trust in the team. But the first thing you have to do, if you're a brand new manager walking into a brand new situation, or manager or leader, is listen. If you go in and just go in and say, okay, here's how we're going to do it from now on. Here's the process we're going to follow. We're going to do A to Z. Now you're back to the 1960s and 70s where it was authoritarian. Yeah, I can't even say it today.
Authoritarian
Leadership.
Yeah, right.
Whereas today, the first thing that I do is I go in and I ask, what do we do well? How are you doing? And learn really where you are. You got to be careful of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I was in a role once where I was hired to clean house, and the owner of the company said, all the salespeople have to go. In fact, all the account managers have to go too, because we're losing 50% of our customers, or 60% of our customers are not renewing, and our salespeople aren't selling, and all of this has to happen. I sat down with each of the areas and I just started to listen. And the reality was they all lost their way due to a lack of leadership. And we ended up within 6 months taking the renewal base of 50% up to 70, and then ultimately up to 90%. So then they were only losing 10% of their business, and then it continued to improve from there in year 2, and then onward. And then at the sales side of it, the owner of the company had hired all the salespeople. The owner of the company was managing the salespeople, but the salespeople weren't selling because they lost touch with the market and they lost touch with the leadership. And so the people that I was told to get rid of, I basically re-energized, and they were hitting it out of the ballpark. And eventually the owner of the company came to me and said, "You didn't do what I asked you to do." And I said, "Why would I throw away people who know the product, know the service, know the customers, know the market? They've been here for 15 years. And why do you care? They're selling. My job is to get this organization growing. I've got retention up. I've got sales up. I'm not going to displace somebody who's now energized and doing a great job." And that owner of that company wasn't satisfied with that answer. He wanted me to just get rid of them. And I couldn't do that. Throw away good people and to bring in people that don't know what you're doing, train them, have them go out and build a pipeline. I mean, that was just the opposite.
How did that end up?
Poorly.
Okay.
In year, almost going into the 3rd year, the owner came into the office one day and said, "This is your comp agreement," and he ripped it up. He said, "Now you're only getting your base salary." And I said, "Well, A, I know you're privately held and you have the ability to do that, but B, are you firing me?" And he said, "No, I'm just not paying you your additional compensation anymore. You're making too much money." Okay, I'm making too much money, but your revenue was X before, now it's 40% higher. You're paying me for what you asked me to do. And so ultimately, I was there probably 8 more weeks before I landed another job and got the help.
Before I let you go, I want to end on if you think about where we're headed, what makes you optimistic and what makes you pessimistic about leadership, particularly in the workplace?
I am very optimistic about leadership in the workplace. Again, because I think there are a lot of good leaders out there who understand that leadership is an evolution and that you have to continue to learn, develop, and enhance what you're doing. So I have a lot of optimism for the future. Now, where do I see the negative side of it? I see it with the noise around us. What the noise in Washington over the last decade or more hasn't helped. I think as a country, I think sometimes we're focused on the wrong things, but I don't. And as long as people in industry don't follow what happens in Washington and try to act in the same manner or behavior, I think we'll be fine. And I think if people will adapt the integrity mindset, they'll see a different way.
Jim, you're full of lots of really great resources. I've gone out and I've checked out your site, and we're going to put this on the show notes. On the way out, any sort of parting words for us as we depart? This has been full of so many gems.
I would offer a couple of things. Number one, I'm a huge believer in mentoring, and I mentor a number of people today. I probably can't take on a lot more mentorees. However, if you don't have a mentor and you're a leader, please find one. If you don't know how to choose a mentor, reach out to me. I'll help you. And there's no charge for that. I mean, I took on the responsibility of leadership to make other people better. And if I can do that and help you find a mentor, I'll be glad to do that.
Awesome.
The other thing I would ask your listeners is, at the end of the day, I'd like to know what you took from this podcast. And so I'm going to offer the following. For the first 3 people who comment on your podcast site, what they got from today's broadcast or show, I will send them a copy of my book autographed.
Awesome.
So the first 3 people, and I will ship that out. Now, I'm not asking you to put your personal address in that comment, but you can reach out to them and get their address,
Absolutely.
pass it on to me, and I will ship them a free copy of the book. And because we are interested in the feedback, it helps the show, and it also helps me. It also helps me.
Positive
So
or negative.
first 3.
That's very generous of you. Thanks. This is a first on the show. So yes, folks listening, first 3 folks, share some feedback, what you liked, what you took away, what more you can see, opportunities, things we did that you didn't like. All of it is all welcome. So looking forward to seeing that. Jim, I really appreciate you so much for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll have you back again here soon. Good seeing you, man.
I'd be glad to be back, and thank you for having me. This has been a great discussion.
Thanks, Jim. You've been listening to an Amos Talks production.